From Pokemon Crystal's player color swap to Fire Red Leaf Green's super hidden items, Heart Gold Soul Silver's secret shiny crown, and so much more, today we're going to be looking at 10 obscure secrets or poorly documented details in every Pokemon game. I'll start things off in Generation 1's Red, Blue, and Yellow. So if you're watching this video, you've probably seen the iconic Mew glitch on the Cerulean Bridge. But this exploit can go so much further to things like getting a bunch of early Pokemon or even a level 100 Nidoking before the first gym in Yellow. And looking at the latter first, you want to go to this trainer in Viridian Forest and walk to the right so they're out of frame. Align yourself so that when you walk towards them, they spot you, but hold start as you step into their sight to open the menu and then use an escape rope. He'll spot you, which primes the game to be pending to start a battle, but it won't be able to execute the operation. This puts the game in a vulnerable state, which can be exploited to change what the battle will be. We next want to encounter another Pokemon, and the special stat of it will be used to reference the index number of the upcoming battle. The Pokemon we're looking for is a level 4 Caterpie in Viridian Forest with a special stat of 7, which lines up to the index number of Nidoking. And if we have a Pokemon use Growl 6 times, we can change the upcoming battle level from 7 down to 1. After fanning the Caterpie, we'll go towards Mount Moon and have the NPC take us back to the gym. We'll then walk into Viridian Forest and battle with a level 1 Nidoking will then force trigger. Upon catching it at level 1, the game will read Nidoking to have negative experience. And if we get into battle with a weak Pokemon that gives Nidoking less than 50 experience, the game will perform an XP read, but Nidoking's experience will cause an underflow and make it grow to level 100. And this is obviously a very cool trick, but also stomping the game might get boring quickly. I think the real value of this glitch is using it to get Pokemon you wouldn't normally have access to at this point in the game. Like, for example, fighting a level 3 Caterpie is most likely to give you a Voltorb, which is not normally obtainable until much later. A level 6 Caterpie can give you a Slowbro, and a level 8 Pidgey will either give you Lickitung or the incredible Execute. You can also lose to Brock's Junior Trainer with a Diglett to get a Gengar. Just make sure to skip the growls so that you ensure it comes at level 7 and is ready for a regular playthrough. But what if you're still worried about difficulty? Well, in Red and Blue, we all know that the game's difficulty is determined through the starter selection. But in Yellow, it's actually decided by the game. That's because your rival's evolution is dependent on the results of your first 2 battles. Now, it's often thought that if you win one battle and lose the other, he has a Flareon, while 2 losses result in Vaporeon. That is not necessarily true. If you lose the first fight, he will have Vaporeon no matter what the outcome of the Route 22 fight is. And second, if you win the first fight, you can lose to him on Route 22 and still see Jolteon. You can just re-challenge the second fight over and over until you win, and this will give him Jolteon as long as you want the lab fights. And so the actual way to get Flareon is after beating him in the lab, skip the optional fight, and once you beat Brock, the flag will set to give you Flareon. Another interesting note on difficulty in all 3 games is that Surge, Erica, Koga, Sabrina, and Blaine can be fought in almost any order. Most Gen 1 fans know that Sabrina and Koga are non-linear, but Kanto has practically 0 guide rails. Misty's Cascade badge gives you access to use Cut, found on the SS Anne, and this means you can skip Surge and move on through Rock Tunnel to get to Erica. But there's nothing forcing you to fight Erica either, it's just the upcoming Snorlax roadblock. To clear him, you just need to clear the Ghost in Pokemon Tower with the Silph Scope or the Pokédoll from the department store. This then gives you the Pokeflute to open up the path to Koga, while Sabrina has been available since you reached Celadon. In fact, the only requirements from badge 3 to 7 is that Koga has to be fought before Blaine because you need access to Surf. And so that means that someone, somewhere, one time out there, has fought this game in the cursed order of badge 1 Brock, badge 2 Misty, badge 3 Koga, badge 4 Blaine, badge 5 Sabrina, badge 6 Erica, and a historic badge 7 Showdown against Lieutenant Surge. And a bonus fact for Pokemon Red and Green, these games were so busted that if you lost to Sabrina, when you go back inside her gym, you would immediately get the victory text and her gym badge. But if you want to save a bit of time in your game, you can travel down Cycling Road without ever getting a bike. Now, obviously, when you try to walk by this guard, he'll tell you to bring a bike, but if you just hold left on the D-pad and continue pressing A, you'll eventually get by him. The game will then just put you on a bike when you step outside, on your way to a badge 3 Koga. And on the topic of gym leaders, did you ever notice that in Red and Blue, no Pokemon learns gym leader TM moves naturally? Until Yellow, there's no electric type that learns Thunderbolt, nothing learns Fire Blast, and so on. This is why at level 51, Articuno learns Blizzard, Zapdos learns Thunder, but Moltres doesn't learn Fire Blast. And no, they didn't just give it Flamethrower. Instead, they opted for the greatest move ever, Leer. But while Moltres didn't learn many good moves, it did have at least 620 base stats. Most of you know that in Gen 1, a Pokemon had a single number value for a stat that was just called special. And when translating to modern day equivalents, all three birds had 125 special attack and defense, which gave Articuno 610, Moltres 620, and Zapdos 615. Blastoise and Charizard only had 510 versus today's 530 and 534. Gyarados and Exeggutor had the highest base stat of any non-legendary at 580. Cloyster was also incredible with 85 in special for 565 bases, and Tentacruel's 120 special gave it 555. But craziest of all was Mewtwo, with 154 special attack and defense. This translated into a modern day 744, which would only ever be surpassed by Eternamax Eternatus, Primal Groudon and Kyogre, Mega Rayquaza, Ultra Necrozma, and itself. And did you know that if you save in an elevator and reload the game doesn't know which floor you're on and will always put you back on the first floor? Or how about the fact that in Gen 1, Poison is super effective against Bug, and Bug is super effective against Poison? This unintentionally made Bug type amazing, but you wouldn't know it because there were no strong Bug moves. Actually, in our Yellow Legacy hack, we learned pretty quick that adding in strong Bug moves would just make the game utterly broken for Bug types. It basically gave Scyther super effective coverage over half the game, plus 4 times super effective coverage on Venusaur, Vileplume, and Victory Bell. So that was why we had to remove that interaction. Bug type cut was cool. And on that note, did you guys know that in Generation 1, you can also use HM cut to cut the grass? Yeah, I know cutting grass is something that's been floating around the Obscure Secrets pipeline for like ever, but it usually pops up in Gen 2 and Gen 3 content, and I think a lot of people overlook that you can also do it in Gen 1. Now, one fun fact that is documented well in Generation 1, but not Generation 2, is X accuracy. It's well known that in Gen 1, X accuracy makes it so accuracy checks are completely bypassed. This makes Pokemon that can learn an OHKO move like Nidoking incredibly busted. But X accuracy works the exact same in Generation 2. And I think this is less known because the Pokemon that learn OHKO moves are less prominent, like Nidoking, while there's no OHKO move TM like Fissure. But Gen 2 also has some interesting aesthetic exploits, like the one to make your female character green. Nope. Female character orange and the male character blue. To begin this, you want to start a new game and load in the character with your desired color. Save your game and close out, and then when relaunching, start a new game with the desired character. Once loaded in, save again, but when the words saving with 3 dots appear, reset the game. When you load in now, you'll load the color palette of the first save onto the character of your second one. And this is a pretty fun aesthetic change that will last all the way up until your player ever has to warp, which will probably be Slowpoke well. And while you're in Azalea Town, I would not recommend getting balls from Kurt, because that man has some very misleading balls. The Love Ball works on the same gender despite stating it works on the opposite one. And then there's the Moon Ball, which was mistakenly programmed to have a higher catch rate on Pokemon that evolve through Burn Heal. The Fast Ball is described as being good at catching fast Pokemon, but in reality, it gives you a 4 times catch rate on Magnemite, Grimer, and Tangela. The ball was intended to have a good rate on Pokemon that flee, but there was a programming error that resulted in it only working on the first 3 Pokemon on the list of Fleamons rather than looking at the 3 tables of Fleamons. And fleeing Pokemon themselves are quite the oddity. There are Pokemon in Gen 2 programmed to flee that you will never encounter in the wild. This list includes Eevee, which is acquired as a gift encounter, Umbreon, but not Espeon, Porygon, which is in the Celadon prize counter, Togetic, along with Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres, which are not even available in Gen 2. To get them, you would need to trade from Gen 1 with the Time Capsule, which is an interesting mechanic itself, because despite Gen 1 Pokemon not having held items, some Pokemon traded up will actually come carrying one. Abra holds the TM for Psych Up, which is the only way to get it in Gen 2. There's Metal Powder from Ditto, which raises its defense. The only way to acquire Bright Powder is from trading over the legendaries. You can get leftovers from Clefable and Snorlax. Jigglypuff comes with a Polka Dot Bow, which had the same function as a Pink Bow, which both are the early prototypes of the Silk Scarf. But coolest of all is the Light Ball. It's often thought that the Pikachu on Red's team is holding one, but in Gen 2, it's not. The only way to get a Light Ball in Gen 2 is by trading up the Pikachu the player receives in Pokemon Yellow. But if you're looking to get, say, another Dragon Breath TM, well, you can do that too. In Crystal, if the player whites out from poison damage while still inside the Dragon Shrine, right after receiving the Rising Badge, they will be warped to a Pokemon Center, skipping the following events outside the shrine where Claire normally gives you her TM. But if you return to Blackthorn Gym, there's a program event for Claire to reward the player with the TM here. But due to an oversight, if the player goes back to the Dragon's Den and stands on the tile directly in front of the shrine's door, well, the script will still load and Claire will give the player a second TM. Now in GS only, there is one weird detail that has troubled me for years. So please indulge my 7-year-old worries and fears. In the Bird Town, there's a fire breather who has his sprite turn completely grayscale upon defeat. In his defeat text, he'll say he burned down to ashes. As a kid, I thought that when I defeated this guy, I killed him. I like turned him to stone or something. I can still remember the first time it happened and I was just shook. But I noticed that after you do another fight, he just turns back to normal. So I think it's likely that the legendary beast's grayscale state bugs onto him simply due to some unoptimized coding. Now, one place I never got to as a kid, in Kanto, there's a trainer house that lets you fight the last person you mystery gifted. Emulator players always end up getting the default Cal, who just has the 3 starters, but a character with more to them is the little girl in Goldenrod department store. If you mystery gift with her, you can actually battle her in the trainer house. Her name is Trainer Carrie, and she has 3 different teams with a Gen 2 starter and a new trade evo. Another mysterious character in the Gen 2 games is this fellow here named Kirk. Labeled within the code as Mania, Kirk lives in Cyanwood and is the guy who gives you a shuckle. More interestingly, is it's theorized that he's one of the strongest trainers in Johto. It's known that Kirk had a Sneasel at one point, which was stolen by the rival, and in Crystal, Sneasel can be found in the Ice Cave. But if we jump back to, the first Gen 2 games, the only place that you can find Sneasel is at the entrance of Mount Silver, which is a place that can only be accessed if you have 16 badges. Now, it's not known for sure, but one character that we do know can access this place is Lance. Did you know that Gen 2's Lance is the only champion to have the same move on all 6 members of his team? That move being Hyper Beam. Generation 3. Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. In Rustboro City, Emerald's rival fight has 1 different team depending on your player character. If you choose Torchic, Brendan's fire-type member is Slugma, while Maze will be Torkoal. It's presumed that this was a design oversight, seeing as Torkoal is pretty overpowered, plus in the following fights, May never uses it again. But what is pretty mind-blowing for those who don't know is what happens if you skip this. If you never visit the Rustboro Pokémon Center, you can white out and be sent back to Petalburg, skipping this conversation entirely. Now, this would have caused the player to miss trading Pokénav numbers with the rival, but Game Freak actually accounted for this. When you head to Mr. Briney's, your rival will pop out of his house as you walk in and give you the exact same dialogue and fight you'd normally get in Rustboro. And that's not the only time Game Freak worked to make sure you don't miss something from being bad. When you reach Slateport and head to the Oceanic Museum, when walking in, the receptionist will normally charge you $50. But if you try to enter and don't have enough money, the receptionist assumes you're part of the team and just lets you in for free. And that's not the only case in Ruby and Sapphire where NPCs break the rules. Huge shout out to the legend Picaspre for this one. Only just recently discovered this. But it turns out if you go into the abandoned ship and wait for this kid to be looking towards you through the wall, he'll actually get so excited to spot your heat signature that he will Hulk smash right through the wall and instantly battle you. Similarly, before you reach Lily Cove, there's another NPC that you can manipulate to walk right through this fence. And in another visual oddity, in Emerald, there's a building that you can change your box data to manipulate curtains. Normally the house has plain white curtains, but due to a tileset oversight that connects to Pokemon data in certain slots of the box, the game will load different graphical layers. Now, if you were to head to Mount Pyre from Lily Cove, you'd have a 2% chance to encounter the wind chime Pokemon Chimecho. While this guy is late, hard to find, and not particularly good, this fella is the last Pokemon in Gen 3's internal index. And it actually comes after Jirachi and Deoxys. And this has led people to assume that the original plan for this Pokemon was for it to be another mythical, which is honestly kind of sad because Chimecho really didn't get a whole lot, and this would have been a really big purpose for it. But speaking of Deoxys, this Gen 3 alien was created with the signature move Psycho Boost. But due to some odd design decisions in Pokemon XD, a purified Shadow Lugia also has access to the move. This made Psycho Psycho Boost technically learnable by a second Pokemon in Gen 3, despite it being intended to be exclusive to Deoxys. Also, did you know that the XD in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness stands for Extra Dimension? This was confirmed in a magazine using the Wayback Machine on Nintendo's official website. But regardless, the Seafloor Cavern is also no stranger to weird game decisions. From the entrance beach, you walk into the first room, and when walking out the same door, return from where you came. Cool, very logical. That makes sense. Why are you bringing it up? Well, going through this door also brings you back out to the beach. It's stupid. I hate it. I hate this dungeon. But in Ruby Sapphire, it's even worse. The strength puzzle can actually be put into an unsolvable state. And if you push certain boulders and then exit without solving the puzzle, you can actually move 2 boulders onto the same tile, making it completely unsolvable. And buried deep in the data of Gen 3 is an unused ability called Cacophony. It functioned identical to Soundproof, blocking sound-based moves like Growl or Uproar, but no Pokemon in the game ever learned it, and it was removed in Gen 4. And going with another champion-themed fact, did you know that Wallace is the only champion who specializes in a specific type to actually have every Pokemon on his team use that type? Sorry, Lance fans, but he is officially a Dragon Master. Also, for almost 20 years, up until Gita, Wallace had the lowest base stat total for any champion. Now, did you know that in the Gen 3 remakes, the item finder is way more useful than it is in basically every other game? Fire Red, Leaf Green have 5 hidden items that can only be picked up by activating the item finder on a certain space. Most commonly known are Snorlax's spots, which will net you leftovers, but Giovanni's gym spot has the Macho Brace, where Mr. Fuji stood in the Pokemon Tower reveals a Sooth Belt. There's a PP Max at the top of Cape Brink on this small patch of land, and beneath Ho-Oh Naval Rock lies the Sacred Ash. There's 2 out of 3 on the thumbnail. Haven't clickbaited you yet. Unless we change it. There are also hidden coins scattered all over the floor of the Rocket Game Corner. And on the Sevi Islands pattern bush area on 6 Island, there is a strangely dense patch of tall grass. If you look closely, you'll see the design is based on the internal circuit board layout of the original Pokemon Red and Blue cartridges. There's also a neat reward system in Lorelei's house that isn't mentioned anywhere in-game. Every 25 times the player enters the Hall of Fame, a new doll will appear. It's an Easter egg that tracks your champion streak, and it's pretty cool to see her cabin fill up with plushes as a sort of tacit trophy room for your league runs. On Waterpath in the Sevi Islands, there's a woman who's obsessed with measuring Heracross. If you bring her one, she'll measure its height and give you a nest ball. If you later bring her a taller one, she'll give you another. Trading card stickers are another weird Gen 3 feature that most people don't know exist. These aren't the same colored stars you get for hitting major milestones like completing the Pokedex. These stickers are earned for not well documented accomplishments like 100 Link Battle wins or hatching tons of eggs. Now, one thing that is fairly well documented, but worth mentioning for those that don't know, Lieutenant Surge says he fought in a war, which is where he learned how to train electric types. It's the only mention of this war from Gen 1 to Gen 3, and this has led to many fan theories. Now, there's also no shortage of creepy Pokedex entries within the universe, but what's cool is that Hypno's Fire Red entry actually relates to an event within the game. Hypno's entry says there once was an incident in which it took away a child it hypnotized. Now, this isn't a direct reference to the Lost Cell arc in the Sevi Islands, because you can get Hypno and it will say this before that actually happens. But you know, it's one of those things that it happened before and it happens again. Why do we allow Hypnos to exist? I'm sorry, not all Hypnos. But speaking of creepy psychic types, yes, Jinx did in fact change color, but did you ever notice that in Generation 1 and 2, Mr. Mime had 4 fingers, but after this he had 5? This was done because people in Japan wrote in complaining, believing 4 fingers linked Mr. Mime with the Yakuza, who would regularly cut off their pinky finger as punishment. Yes, Weebra, I said Yakuza.
You couldn't be any more Yakuza if you tried. Yakuza. All right, I guess you're not in the Yakuza. You're a...
Anyway, this is not even the only Pokemon that this happened with. Data shows a bunch of other Pokemon like Raticate, Kadabra, Poliwrath, Charmander, and many more all got this treatment. Generation 4, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Throughout many days of the year, like January 12th, the snow in Snowpoint City changes to something called Diamond Dust. They say Diamond Dust is guaranteed to make your night if your night is a bust. In reality, this was a purely visual change with a notable sparkle in the air. And this date specifically was originally an Easter egg to celebrate Junichi Masuda's birthday and has appeared in other games like Heart Gold Soul Silver and X and Y. One date-based discovery found in the leaks shows specific calendar dates that change your encounter rates. These are hard-coded into the game, and depending on the day, they can make wild Pokemon show up 5 to 10% more or less often. There's tons of dates, including everything from major holidays to even tragedies that occurred in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and New York. And did you know that bike racks around Sinnoh aren't just decoration? Also, not the most obscure thing that I just had no idea about. If you walk up to one and press A, you can hop on or off your bike without opening the bag or using a registered key item. Another similar thing that I feel like I should have known. In double battles, you normally just see the HP bars of your two Pokemon, but you can press start when you're on the main battle screen to switch those bars to numerical values. And if you're a fan of calcing fights, maybe you're a fan of using the in-game calculator. And if you happen to input a calculation that results in a number matching the dex number of a Pokemon you've seen, it will play that Pokemon's cry. For example, if you do 37 plus 1 and you've seen Vulpix, Pokemon 38, its cry will play. So, you know, very fun for those of you interested in math. Nerd. But don't fear, because it turns out that Spiritomb is also a fan of the numbers. Specifically, number 108. Its Pokedex number in Sinnoh is 108. Its base defense and special defense stats are both 108. It weighs 108 kilograms. Pokedex says it's made of 108 spirits, and in Legends Arceus, you need to collect 108 wisps to summon it. Craziest and maybe most obscure of all is that in Oraz, the route you catch it on is also Route 108. And speaking of ghost types, you know how the move Curse is like question mark, but when a ghost type uses it, it has a different effect? Well, there's an unused Arceus form hidden in the game's code, which is for the unknown type. Arceus even has Sprite and data for this form, but since there's no plate, it's unobtainable during normal gameplay. Actually, I guess Arceus itself is unobtainable for normal gameplay, so you gotta cheat to get this, but it's in the game and pretty cool. Now, the way you cheat to get Arceus in DP involves a bunch of void hopping shenanigans that we've discussed on the channel before, but in the original Japanese Diamond and Pearl, you could backtrack into the void during the Elite Four. In Aaron's room, if you surf through the door you just entered, the game lets you go out even though it's supposed to be locked. And doing this dumps you into an unloaded map, great for ruining your save file or finding unobtainable mythicals, which is something that Cyrus's Crobat should have been a myth. See, Crobat evolves from Golbat via high friendship, and that directly contradicts everything Cyrus stands for. He's obsessed with removing emotions and, quote, spirit from the world. And so for him to have a Crobat in his last fight seems to imply that he's not as cold or uncaring as even he himself would like to think. And how about a fun fact for your Sinnoh champion, Cynthia? Kind of liking this champion fact becoming a thing. Okay, so fun Cynthia fact. Up until Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Cynthia's Platinum team was the only champion team with 0 repeating types. Spiritomb was Ghost Dark, Togekiss was Normal Flying, Lucario Fighting Steel, Roserade Grass Poison, Milotic Water, and Garchomp Dragon Ground. Now moving over to Heart Gold and Soul Silver, if you bring a transfer event Arceus into these games and bring it to the ruins of Alph, you get teleported to an unknown location between Sinnoh and Johto called the Sinjoh Ruins. Arceus then creates a new Dialga, Palkia, or Giratina, depending on which one you want. The ruins of Alph also have a hidden radio signal that gets weird if you tune it into just the right frequency. If you move the radio dial to 13.5 in the ruins, you'll hear a warped static broadcast that includes distorted ho-oh cries and a glitched up version of the Azor Flute. What's much more obscure about this, however, is that it increases your encounter rate for unknowns you haven't caught. Now, in the Battle Castle, during your fight against Darek, Caitlyn can be seen standing quietly on the balcony behind him. This is the same Caitlyn who would later be revealed as an Elite Four member in Black and White. Now, are you ready for what is still hopefully thumbnail part number 3? If you walk through specific patches of grass with a Pokemon that has high friendship, there's a slim chance that you will find a shiny leaf. Super obscure item on its own. But if a Pokemon collects 5 of them, and you talk to Ethan or Lyra, they'll craft these into a shiny crown. This is a crazy, super obscure thing. It even gives you a cool little page noting your close bond with that specific Pokemon. And there you go, 3 for 3, no clickbait. Now, one leftover mechanic from the Gen 2 games is the Bell Tower's incorrect naming. For Gen 2 fans, I'm talking about the Tin Tower, which I still call the Tin Tower, but this actually comes from a mistranslation. Now, this was fixed in Heart Gold Soul Silver, but in both Diamond Pearl and even BDSP, BDSP. In those games, Johto's Bell Tower is still called the Tin Tower. Now, in Violet City, there's an NPC that will give the player an egg for Mareep, Wooper, or Slugma. The egg is determined by giving him a code, which you can determine online using your trainer ID. And this is a really cool concept because it was a feature that could have gave the player access to otherwise unavailable Pokemon. Unfortunately, both Mareep and Wooper can be caught on the following route, while still arguably possibly useful, Slugma is Slugma. Now, before Violet, there is a pond you can surf across to reach an area that can be just barely seen from the Cherry Grove Pokemon Center. Heart Gold Soul Silver fans might not think a whole lot about this, but to Gen 2 fans, it's a really big deal. In the originals, you could also see this plot of water, but it was completely inaccessible. The only reason it was there in the first place was due to the original mapping actually having Cherry Grove at the bottom of Route 32 next to what it was ultimately an unused town. We've also got a video on that has 7 views on the original layout of Johto. It's pretty cool. Of course, there's also the iconic hidden areas of National Park. Well known to most, but mind-blowing if not, you can walk through a part where the fence has been broken away. Walking all the way around reveals a hidden area with the Dig TM, but even cooler is if you continue walking further past this hidden area, you can pick up a hidden full heal dropped on the ground. And how about another fun fact about Champion Lance? Did you know that Lance has the highest total base stat average of any champion in the main games? This is a side effect of running 3 under-evolved pseudo-legendaries. Generation 5, Black and White. Did you know that in the Castelia City Pokemon Center, there's a secret reward for collecting trainer IDs? If you can gather 50 trainer IDs across trades and interactions, the lottery clerk will reward you with a Master Ball. This is cool because while the other games have ways to get Master Balls, it's always through the lottery system, which, listen, it's not gonna happen, but a second Master Ball in Black and White is actually fairly reliable. And did you know that Juniper's Minccino at the start of the game actually has a chance to be shiny? The Minccino she throws out is generated like any wild Pokemon, complete with stats, IVs, and natures, meaning it can randomly appear shiny. And if you tap on a Pokemon Sprite with a stylus, it will flip to reveal the back Sprite. The flip pose will even persist if you scroll away or change entries, staying that way until you tap it again to flip it back. This is something I recently did during a playthrough for my second channel, and I was like, wait, why is my Pokemon looking the other way? But yeah, you just give a little tap and you're good to go. One more practical thing that I wish I had known during that playthrough, you can hold L and press A on a move during battle to check its effects. And now it is time for your government-mandated Gen 2 related fact. In Icarus City, there's a house that you can only access during winter. And inside, you'll find the Team Rocket Grunt who stole the machine part and hid it in Misty's gym in gold, silver, and crystal. The man explains that he gave up on reviving Team Rocket, returned home to Unova, and fell in love and got married, which I find is so funny because it's implied that he's from this crazy exotic place where people talk a little weird or, maybe don't speak English. But no, he's just from Unova. Also, his wife gives you a Rage Candy bar. How nostalgic. Now, did you know that if you hold the B button while your screen has NPCs on bikes, they'll start riding at double speed? It's speculated to be a leftover testing animation, but it works consistently and looks ridiculous. I like the fan theory that the bikes are on the same radio frequency as your shoes, and so when you press your in-game little controller button to turn your shoes into sport mode, it sends out to all the other bikes and they go fast. Now, one more practical feature are the NPCs scattered around the game that will buy items from you for way more than they're usually worth. The Gourmet Maniac on Route 5 will buy common berries for double, uncommon berries for 50 times, and rare berries for 3,000 times their price. There's also notably the Ore Maniac in the Icarus Pokemon Center who will buy nuggets and star pieces for double. Also, did you know that Patrat and the Elemental Monkeys, along with Furfu, were the last Pokemon to be featured in a Switch game? These guys were only finally shown in a Pokemon Direct, showing they would appear in ZA. And as for our fun champion fact, Alder is known for using bug types despite not being a bug specialist. This is similar similar to how Livingstone isn't a steel specialist. But very interestingly, Alder happens to be the only champion to not have a Pokemon who got a Mega Form, and since we're going back to back with the sequels, we're just gonna do 5 fun facts for Black and White 2. First up, if we go back to the house that once had the ex-Rocket Grunts, we'll now see one member from Team Magma and Aqua. And did you know that these games have an infinite money glitch? In Mistralton City, there's a mulch maniac. Watch out, guys, he's crazy. But this guy will buy any kind of mulch from you for 1,000 Pokedollars. The thing is at the Join Avenue Flower Shop, you can buy that exact same mulch for just $400, and it's infinitely repeatable. And then there's the girl in the strange house who gives you a lunar wing. She says she was waiting on the bridge to return the wing herself, which is a direct reference to a one-off ghost encounter in the original Black and White. And so there seems to be enough evidence to suggest she was once afflicted by Darkrai-induced nightmares, similar to the child in the Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum Darkrai events. The theory goes that her parents sought the lunar wing to cure her, but failed to reach her in time. And over at Pokestar Studios, there's an odd tree next to the eastern balcony that you can surf inside. It looks like a regular decorative tree, but if you press A on it while you have a Pokemon with surf, the prompt activates. It leads nowhere and doesn't affect gameplay, but the fact that it has water tiles inside is clearly a mapping oversight. And in the giant chasm, there's another mapping oddity where you can walk inside a tree. It just wasn't coded to properly flag as non-walkable in terrain. So, yeah. Generation 6. X and Y. The Kalos region brought a ton of new features to the game, and arguably even more secrets. With the introduction of the fairy type, these games added a fairy move which no Pokemon ever learns. Light of Ruin was designed as the signature move of Eternal Flower Floette, which was a special variant of Floette intended to be used by AZ during the game's climax. The move had 140 base power with recoil damage and was coded into the game with full animations. Eternal Flower Floette also has a unique model with its own stats between Floette and Florges, but it was never released or even shown in the game. Of course, we must also mention the Ghost Girl in Lumiose City, if for any other reason than people are just gonna think we forgot it or didn't know about it if we don't mention it. If you go to the second floor of a specific building in North Boulevard, the screen will cut to black and the elevator will ding, and a Hex Maniac will silently float across the screen without walking, saying, "No, you're not the one," before disappearing. The only other thing about this that's kind of interesting is this character actually goes on to appear again in Oraz. Way more sad, however, is the old man in Anistar City. This man asks you to leave a low-level Pokemon with him because he's lonely after his wife passed away and he wants someone to take care of. And when you return after becoming champion, you'll find a Pokeball on a table and a message from him thanking you for letting him take care of the Pokemon. And I find it kind of crazy that a story as touching as this happens to exist in the same game with a Dragon Ball Z reference. After beating this trainer on Route 10, he'll say, "Whoa, your power level is incredible. It's over 9,000 for sure." Now, a much better reference can be found in the Lumiose Museum. This place is filled with tons of actual artwork which references previous Pokemon material. You've got paintings of Ecruteak City, Castelia, and Sinnoh's Battle Frontier, which were originally promotional illustrations. And there's even paintings based on old TCG cards like Town Volunteers, Forest Guardian, Mr. Briney's Compassion, and Fossil Excavator. Another cool reference we see is this random NPC in the Lumiose Pokemon Center who casually drops that Professor Oak's grandson studied abroad in Kalos. In case you're not familiar, that's Blue, which is kind of funny because even in the original games, Blue does say bonjour to a player on the SSN, which is just kind of assumed that, yeah, he's just on the boat and caught it up there from some travelers. This is perhaps a way that they tried to tie that in. I don't know. Now in Lumiose Station, you can go behind one of the large wall displays and read a hidden message. Simply says, "I'm going for help, wait in the usual place." Now the game never explains this, but it's assumed this was a leftover detail not used and applied to Looker. Another oddity is this backpacker who will give you an item called the Strange Souvenir. Its description says, "An ornament depicting a Pokemon that is venerated as a protector in some region far from Kalos." This item appears then again in Sun and Moon, telling us it depicts one of the garden deities, confirming this item teased the Alola region. The interesting and weird part is he says you should meet the region's champion, but it's clearly stated that the player is the first champion of Alola. And as for our champion fact, one cool thing about Diantha is that all 6 members of her team give out one of the 6 EVs. Big shout out to Reddit user MX_Tony_4869. design. But something else that I saw mentioned, which I think is even cooler, is how her whole team could possibly be inspired by different cinema genres, since she is an actress. There's Hulucha for action fighting movies, Gorgeist for horror movies, Gudra for kids movies, Tyrantrum and or Auroras for old movies and or documentaries, and finally Gardevoir for the romance movies. And moving over to the Hoenn remakes, we actually get a fun Kalos reference. In Sodopolis, next to the huge tree, you can see Floette's eternal flower next to it. In-game, Wallace states that they received the seed from the tree from a huge man who visited from the Kalos region, which is obviously AZ. And on the note of fairies, the introduction of Megas saw a ton of Pokemon gain new types, but none went as far as Altaria. Previously, the only Pokemon to see an entire type change was Eevee, completely swapping out its normal type along with Azurill, originally losing normal for water. But Mega Altaria became the only Pokemon to completely change its two types. Swablu is normal flying, Altaria drops normal to become Flying Dragon, and its Mega form drops flying to become Dragon Fairy. And in Rustboro, you can make your other Pokemon light as a cloud too. That's just such a stupid script line. Altaria is not light, it weighs like 900 pounds. Wait a second. Oh, okay. Sorry, Altaria. It actually is incredibly light. 45 pounds. Maybe that wasn't as bad a line as I thought. Sorry, Mega Altaria. Anyway, there's a guy here. He gives you a float stone. When you come back, he's a hiker, and he's like, I gained weight or something. Let's move on. When you fight Phoebe in the Elite Four room, during the cutscenes that plays, there's a frame just before it cuts to black where a little girl appears on the chair in the corner of the frame. This is most likely her grandmother, who we know lives at Mount Pyre from speaking to her there in the postgame. Perhaps even weirder can be found in Shelly's room in the Aqua Hideout. If you interact with the picture frame in the corner of the room, you get text describing a young Shelly and Archie having met Jirachi. And in this house in Oraz, there's a map on the wall which is originally created and uploaded by the website Cerebi. If you bring a Pokemon from the original RSE to the Game Freak office, you'll be given a diploma that says, "We hereby certify that this trainer has shown unwavering friendship and unbreakable bonds." When you get to the battle resort, you'll find Looker from Gens 4, 5, 6, and 7 washed up on the shore asking where he is. With this though, there's a fan theory that because Gen 1 and 3 canonically take place at the same time, the gentleman NPC on the Gen 1 and 3 SSN that says, "Shh, I'm a global police agent, I'm on the trail of Team Rocket," is actually Looker, because the SSN was theorized to have sunk in the ocean. Professor Bridget is said to be the creator of the Pokemon Bank system in Pokemon Bank, and she is the older sister of Lynette, the computer technician who lives in the house on Route 114 and is the maintainer of the Pokemon storage system. But Bridget also appeared all the way back in Generation 3 as the one who upgraded the Pokemon storage system to hold 1,500 Pokemon. And finally, let's do a Steven Stone fact, since we covered Wallace in Gen 3. If you have the event Shiny Beldum in your party while you do the Delta episode, Steven says it reminds him of the time he fought Rayquaza alongside a young man with a black Charizard. This is actually a reference to Elaine. Him and his Mega Charizard X were featured in an anime special. Generation 7, Sun and Moon. While the Alola games came out in 2016, there's an Alola design that dates all the way back to 1997. In some TCG art on a booster box, you can see what clearly resembles what would go on to be the design for Alolan Exeggutor. Another blast to the past can be noted if you bring a Pokemon from the Virtual Console version of Silver to Morimoto in the Game Freak office. Here, pretty cool, he'll explain how the president saved their game. And this is a reference to how Iwata sped up the code of Gold and Silver and was able to pack so much onto these cartridges. And in Hokulani Observatory, if you speak to the Magnemite, it says beep, beep, boop, B, boop, boop, BBB, boop, B, boop, 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 B. How eloquent, Magnemite. I couldn't have said it better myself. And if you take this into Morse code, it actually says transit bus route be confirmed. I don't know. There is another cool Kanto reference in the Mali Gardens when you fight the trainers on the bridge. The most obvious part of this is at the end, the guy asks if you want to join Team Rocket. But what's cool is that the trainers that you fight up to this all use the exact same Pokemon as the ones on Nugget Bridge. Another one that I feel like I should have known and I didn't is that Type Null is supposed to be the Mewtwo of Arceus. Ether Foundation created Type Null Silvally with the intention of copying Arceus's power to try to defeat the Ultra Beast as part of their Beast Killer project. This is backed up by the memory system that lets it change type, exactly the same as Arceus's type plates. In fact, this system is actually called RKS, Arceus. Similar to Mewtwo, all three Type Null, originally called Type Full went berserk upon trying to implement the memory system and were all deemed failures. Silvally is the original form of type Full, with type Null being the subdued version wearing a helmet limiter. And on the second floor of Tide Song Hotel, you'll find a girl with a blossom and a comfy. She says, "It is our fate that no one must see us." Then Blossom will charge at you and chase you out of the room. I don't know what's up with that, man. That's not nice. The weird thing though is that if you go back into the room, they're gone. And it's like, where did they go? The window is open and they're pretty high up. And in the Ether House, in the corner of one of the rooms, you can do a personality test, which will tell you what Pokemon you could be. I am a Gryffindor. Also, did you know that there's a wedding in these games? The Grand Hano Resort, if you talk to a kid, he'll invite you to a wedding. No questions asked. The cutscene will then play where two Pikachu get married. And actually, speaking of marriage, Professor Burnett is known for her research on the relationship between Pokemon and other dimensions. She appears in Sun and Moon as the wife of Professor Kukui, but did you know she's also the same professor from the Pokemon Dream Radar? She's also noteworthy for sharing a jacket with Kukui. As others have pointed out, she probably gave it to him because he was never wearing a shirt. And speaking of Professor Kukui, who is the closest thing we get to a champion, Kukui is the champion who uses the most Kanto origin Pokemon despite not having a Kanto origin himself. Lance and Blue obviously use only Gen 1 Pokemon because they first appear in Gen 1. Wallace has Gyarados and Tentacruel to total 2. Leon also sees 2 with G-Max Charizard and Mr. Rhyme. But half of Kukui's team has a Cantonian origin in Snorlax, Magnezone, and Alolan Ninetales. And because we're doing another B2B, we'll do 5 more facts for Ultra Sun and Moon. If you put the box arts of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon together, you can see Ultra Necrozma's face. That is actually really cool. In Po Town, in a few different rooms, there's a chance to see a Delibird in the fireplace. Gosh dang it, why did I already make this is so Harry Potter. Why did I already make a Harry Potter reference? Now, on Ula Ula Beach, you can find a message in a bottle from Ace Trainer Arabella, who appeared in Viridian Gym in Heart Gold Soul Silver. He tells you to deliver it to someone in Mali Gym, who then tells you he's a trainer from Kanto. Nothing like a good old Kanto reference. Now, in Hana Desert, after becoming champion, if you talk to the guy with a Solrock or Lunatone in your party, he'll regain his memories and say, "Those star pulses that you bestowed upon me 30 years ago have all been made safe." He'll then just say, "Back to space," and fly away. If anyone wants to explain this one to me, please feel free. Also, we're past 100 fun facts. So if you're still here and you have not subscribed, that is just downright disrespectful. Hit it! But even more disrespectful, perhaps, is the absurdity that is the 7 Mysteries side quest. Basically, there's this quest where a girl at the trainer school asks you to investigate these 7 mysteries. Each one is a creepy rumor. You've got things like mannequins moving, doors opening on their own, or a cold spot, but they all turn out to have silly or mundane explanations. This is really fun because it's built up with the expectation that this girl is just like silly and freaking out and, you know, whatever, boy who cried wolf. But after you solve all 7, the girl who gave you the quest just mysteriously vanishes, and it's presumed that she is in fact a ghost. You get a nugget for your trouble, but it is just overall so ridiculous and out of place for a quest in Pokemon. And since we've already covered Kanto twice now and probably had like, I don't know, 20 more Kanto references, let's do 5 for Let's Go. Did you know that after you catch the legendary birds and become champion, there's a 1 in 2,000 chance for a legendary bird to spawn as a rare sky encounter? This is actually really cool because it affirms the belief that not all legendary Pokemon are one of a kind. Also, you can fight Mina, one of the Sun and Moon trial captains, each day near the SSAM. Also, did you know that you can find hidden fossils which respawn each day in Cerulean Cave? Another cool post-game feature are the trainers that pop up for each of the original 151 Pokemon, plus Meltan and Melmetal. These are super strong Pokemon that you have to challenge in a one-on-one mirror match, using only the exact same species. They're leveled around 65 to 80 with near perfect IVs, and if you beat just 6 of them, you'll unlock the battle against Red at the Indigo Plateau. And I want to take a second here to note the character Green. Green was originally conceived with concept art for the very first Pokemon Red and Green. But she never actually featured in the Gen 1 games. Her design was then used in the Pokemon Adventures manga, and she was repurposed into the player character Leaf for Fire Red and Leaf Green. But it was only in the Let's Go games where we see Green's first ever in-game appearance. That is, of course, unless you count Pokemon Yellow Legacy. In our design process, we originally used a back-ported sprite for Leaf, but out of respect and just kind of like a commitment to the original vision of Generation 1, we ultimately landed on someone that did a sprite for Green, and it was really cool, and Green is really cool. So yeah, we stand Green. Generation 8, Sword and Shield. Now, as a Johto fanboy, I can't help but start this one with a hilariously ridiculous Gen 2 reference. It's really hard to see in game, but in Sword and Shield, a pinup poster of the original Johto swimmer design can be found on one of the buildings. Another thing near and dear to the older games is the escape rope. Long before characters would usher you out of places, this item was every 9-year-old's best friend. Now, weirdly, the escape rope would only become a key item in Sword and Shield, which is a game that has only 4 locations where it can actually be used. A much more cool item feature can be seen with the attention to detail on the Dusk Ball. When Eternatus is present causing the darkest day, Dusk Balls will act as if it's nighttime no matter the time of day, and perhaps darker than the darkest day. In this house in Chichester, you can find a woman staring at some Litwicks. She says, "The way their flames wave is so strange. Watching it makes me feel so calm." And Litwick's Pokedex entry in black says, "Litwick shines a light that absorbs the life energy of people and Pokemon, which becomes the fuel that it burns." Now, one notable Dark-type Pokemon is Piers Obstagoon. This guy right here, yeah, you see him? This is the first Pokemon within the mainline games, so not counting like Battle Frontier and anything post-game, to actually be given EVs. Now, Obstagoon's EVs were put here because all of the other gyms have Dynamax, which give that Pokemon additional bulk, and they wanted to make sure that Obstagoon still felt good, so they just beefed it up with EVs. And on the topic of Piers, this is almost so obvious that it feels like it shouldn't be obscure, but I never hear people talk of this. Piers was the first Dark-type gym leader in the series. That is insane. Think about it. You've got Karen was E4, Sydney E4, Grimsley E4. Half of the series Dark types just go to evil team leaders. And so despite Dark type being introduced in Gen 2, it took all the way until Gen 8 where the Dark gym leader was also the team leader for the... Dude, I don't know, man. It's just weird. Anyway, in Hammerlock, if you speak to this girl, she'll give you a love letter to bring to someone in Baloney Town. Baloney. Anyway, when you do what the man tells you, Paula was her name, that he spent all his time playing with her when he was young. She fell ill and kept it a secret, which caused a fight, and not long after he moved away. If you turn to the exact same spot she gave you a letter, she'll be gone, and there'll be no indication there is anything there. But if you interact, you'll get a Reaper Cloth. And the Japanese name for the Reaper Cloth translates directly to the Spirit World Cloth. On the Isle of Armor, available only in DLC, there is a location called Ditto Island. You might not know that if you don't pay money, but it has a lot of Ditto. Also, did you know that Sword and Shield is tied for the lowest level spread of any gym league? Milo, the first gym leader, caps at level 20, while Rayhan is just 48. If we're counting original games, this is actually the lowest. Johto's Gen 2 spread is 9 to 40 for 31, but in Heart Gold Soul Silver, Falkner went up to 13, Claire went to 41, and it's actually a tie between these games at 28. And in regards to our champion Leon, did you know that Opal failed him during his audition as a gym leader? He only got 1 of 3 questions she asked him right, noting that while he was an incredible trainer, he was also, quote, hard to read. Now, as you know, BDSP hardly changes anything whatsoever, so we're gonna do a quick 5 facts for these remakes as well. In the old chateau, this painting has glowing red eyes. If you go near it, the eyes stop glowing. If you then turn around, it will laugh at you. And if an encounter starts with a view of your character instead of the wild Pokemon, this means the Pokemon has at least 2 perfect IVs. There's also Italy. A lot of references to Italy. BDSP is also the first game since Yellow to introduce no truly new characters or locations. You could argue the Underground is new, but it's more of a reimagining. Meanwhile, a fun fact about BDSP Cynthia is that this game is the first instance where Cynthia isn't an awful trainer. I'm kidding. She's obviously the best here, but I'm kidding. For all of her previous teams, Cynthia's Garchomp has the Sandveil ability. This ability is only ever taken advantage of in one scenario. This is from her Sun and Moon Battle Tree teams, where if she happens to pull out Mega Garchomp, it will actually have Sandstorm. But BDSP Cynthia is the first time she actually gets good and has a Garchomp with the Rough Skin ability, which actually, like one of the very first videos ever on this channel is me losing in a tie on my first attempt in that fight because of Rough Skin. So in PLA, there is a long list of ancestors to modern day characters. Volo Cynthia, Kamada Rowan, Ray Lucas, Akari Dawn, Professor Leventon, Hoppin Leon, Cillian Cyrus, Coin Saturn, Colza Gardenia, Riley, Sanko Karen, and on and on and on. But there are also some speculated ones that people disagree on. There's Iscan for Nessa, Marshall, or Lenora, Melly for Jupiter, Avery, or Lucian, Polina for Berg, Diantha, Sonia, and Magnolia, and Tuli for Caitlyn. Another one that's even cooler though is there's also paintings in the Diamond and Pearl clan HQs, which have people who look to be ancestors of Alder, Archie, and Maxie. There's also the ancestor of our editor Weebra. An NPC in the Alabaster Icelands says it's cold as a Cubchoo snot out here, but Cubchoo isn't in these games. So I don't know for sure, but it's even possible that Weebra is in fact a time traveler who can also access video games. And yeah, Weebra Cubchoo reference, sorry, it's the best I got. Also, even more hilarious is that this is a quest about you looking for a guy named Craig, who is another one of our team members. So dude, I don't even know. And something I never noticed in Jubilife, probably because I never actually beat these games, is that the music progresses. It's obviously much different from the original, but it develops as you go through the game, getting closer to the Jubilife city theme from Diamond and Pearl. There's also a place in Jubilife Village called the Sevi Kitchen. This is a reference to the Sevi Islands, but the only real link seems to be the name. Another mandatory, obligated Gen 2 reference is the mission called the Clefairies Moonlit Dance, in which you go to a river and you see a group of Clefairies dancing in front of the moon. The music that plays here is the same music you see at the Mount Moon Square in Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Sorry, I get excited over Gen 2 stuff. Now, during the mission, the headache-stricken Psyduck, a group of Psyducks will be blocking a door because they have headaches. This is an obvious reference to one of Pokemon's most ridiculous blockades, the great Tylenol Fetch Quest incident of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Sanqua says she made a painting of the Space-Time Rift, but didn't want to display it because people won't be ready. She gives it to Kamado to keep it safe until it's ready to be displayed, and this painting is probably the one displayed in the Forum Building in Hearthome City in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. There's also a bunch of hidden areas with hieroglyphics. We won't go into this one too much because there's a lot to it, but if you want to know more, you can watch a video in the description that is super in-depth and it is really cool. And finally, we'll take Volo as their champion slot. I guess he's not the champion, but just go with it. Volo is heavily implied to be a time traveler from the ancient past, but Volo also happens to be the only villainous character who is not affiliated with a team or gang. Generation 9, Scarlet and Violet. So I want to start our final games with the history of the most indecisive move in all of Pokemon, Rock Smash. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this move's journey has been? In Generation 1, Rock Smash didn't exist. It was only introduced in Generation 2 as a field move. However, it was an optional TM that was not mandatory for game progression that you could get from an NPC and then rebuy at the Goldenrod department store. In Generation 3, they were like, that's weird. So they turned it into a full-time HM that also applied to Generation 4. But in Generation 5 and 6, it then went back to being a TM, except for in the Hoenn remakes, where it was once again changed to be an HM. In Generation 7, HMs were then canceled, but Rock Smash then decided to become a move tutor move in Alola, while simply being a secret technique in Let's Go. It then stayed out of the game in Generation 8, until the Sinnoh remakes dropped, where it then technically returned as an HM once again. It's then completely gone for Legend Arceus. And finally, after having what is like the most ridiculous journey of all time, it's just a move that a few Pokemon can learn and has no other use outside of that. Anyway, did you know that Moist Critical is MC Sledge in the Ghost Gym? And did you know that if you draw lines between all the team star bases on the map of Paldea, you'll see the shape of the star constellation Cassiopeia, which is a reference to Penny's team star nickname? Damn, that is some awesome little sprinkling of sick attention to detail. Another neat detail can be seen when a shiny Diplin uses its signature move, Syrup Bomb. The games aren't always this consistent, but in this case, the syrup will be gold like the color of its shiny rather than the usual red. Another fun little detail can be seen in Cortando City. If you look in a swimming pool, the pattern on it is the Generation 1 map screen water tile pattern. Damn. Now in the Indigo Disc, you can find Ditto Blocks as one of the gold quests when playing online with friends. These Ditto Blocks have a 1 in 100 chance of being shiny. Oh, what's that? You want another Gen 2 reference? Okay, well in Generation 9, one of the newly added Paradox Pokemon is Iron Bundle. That's Delibird, but Iron Bundle is an ice water type, whereas Delibird was ice flying. What's really cool though, is in the original Space World demo of Gen 2, Delibird was ice water, which Iron Bundle is an intentional reference to. One weird detail, however, can be seen in the Blueberry Academy League club room. If you have the dark theme, the girl in this painting will just blink occasionally, because why not? Now, did you know there's a guy that appears in almost every single Pokemon game? The technology guy is a recurring NPC in nearly every game. He's basically known for saying something about the newly added tech of the game you're playing. So in Red and Blue, he tells the player, technology is incredible. You can now store and recall items and Pokemon as data via PC. While in Scarlet and Violet, he says, technology is great. If you connect with friends, you can head out on adventures together, up to 4 of you at a time. And finally, guys, wow, if you're still here, you are a legend. You made it through every single, wow, good job. I want to congratulate everyone. Weebra, Craig, I'm even gonna myself, because this was a monumentally huge video. We didn't plan on this. It just got big. So thank you. Let's finish this one out and go full circle. You probably know it, but it's near and dear to my heart. In Alfornada, there are murals which feature sprites inspired by the original Pokemon Red and Blue games menu Pokemon icon. I'm losing my mind. My mind is slipping. Alfornada murals, OG Pokemon sprites. That's the point. Listen, that's it. It's just a fantastic reference to OG players, and it is our final obscure fact of Pokemon. Thank you guys so much for watching. That's enough YouTube for you today. As always, go click on one of these videos, add it to your watch later. It'll pop up in your suggested again. Subscribe. I'll see you soon. Okay. Much love. Big kiss. Mwah. See you later.